It's not just a street. It's a collection of stories, people who live and work on this magical street. It's the center of the universe.
You're listening to World Radio Paris, and this is Oliver G. with brand new show, The Eiffel Tower. I'm here with producer James Vazina.
Hi, everyone.
Hit the jingle, James.
Eiffel Tower with Oliver G.
That jingle was performed last week live in the studio by Paris-based band Slim and the Beast. If you haven't checked them out, or indeed if you haven't checked the episode out, please go and check it out on Mixcloud.
Mixcloud World Radio Paris.
Okay, and for those who aren't familiar with the Eiffel Tower, this is a show where me, Oliver G., will be delving into France, a country I've lived for 2 years, but I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'll often, in fact, every week I aim to be helped by a special guest. And this week we've got a very special guest indeed.
Pleasure to be here.
It's not James this time, we're not that desperate. But we're jumping out of the musical world from last week and into the literary world. This week's guest is actually a New York Times best-selling author. Her name is Elaine Sciolino, and she's an American. She's been living in Paris for 15 years, and she's written a brilliant book that I'm holding in my hand right now called The Only Street in Paris. And this is a book where this woman's been living on this particular street that stretches in northern Paris from, I think it's from the 9th to the 18th arrondissement.
That's right, on the way up to Montmartre.
Exactly, and she's really studied this street. She's met the people, she's met the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick makers, and she's put together a really lively account of everything that goes on in this street and has gone on in the history. And we're going to be meeting her at a very special place, the Shakespeare and Company bookshop down near the Seine River. All right, then, I'm on the scooter. James Vazina, the producer, is on the back. Let's start it up and head to Shakespeare and Company. We're here with New York Times best-selling author Elaine Sciolino. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Oliver, I am delighted to be with you today.
It's a thrill to have you here, and we're not in the studio today, actually. We are in Shakespeare and Company bookshop, which is a famed institution of, this goes back, how far does it go back? Decades, over a century even. How does it feel to be out here? You've just done a talk. How does it feel to be in such a place selling your books?
Well, it's pretty cool. You know, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, on the west side, in a Italian-American neighborhood, and, the granddaughter of poor Sicilian immigrants, and 2 generations later, I'm sitting here with you being interviewed and made famous.
Exactly. Well,
definitely come a long way there.
Definitely, I've come a long way, and I'm honored to be your guest.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. We've already talked a bit about your book, but for those who don't know it, it's called The Only Street in Paris, Life on the Rue des Martyrs, and it's about your life for the past several years on a street in northern Paris. Can you just give us a little bit more about the book?
It's basically my love letter to a street. It's part memoir, it's part history, it's part culture. And I want to tell people my experiences and my encounters with people on the street, because it's not just a street. It's a collection of stories, and it's stories about the people who live and work on this magical street. And I say in the book, and it sounds so trite, but it's true, that I can never be sad on the Rue des Martyrs, because I feel at home there in a way that I didn't when I lived in a much more posh neighborhood on the left bank of Paris.
And what I like about the book, it's a brilliant book. I've read it since we last met, which we'll talk about in a second. But what I like about it is it's not the typical book about a memoir about Paris with all the struggles of all the things we've heard a million times. It's more almost like a series of vignettes of these people that you've met, interesting characters, and how they make up the street and your life. Tell me a little bit about your sort of daily life there on this street.
I go out of my apartment and I can go into the little cafe at number 8 and sit there, and I look out at the shops across the way, and it's almost like having 4 or 5 different theaters going at the same time. The greengrocer, the cheesemonger, the fish store, the butcher, the hardware store, and I watch people come in and out, and I feel part of a community. There's so many of us when we move to a foreign country don't feel as if we belong. And it's hard to break in. And it's hard to break in a country like France, and particularly in a city like Paris. And to feel as if you finally not have made it, but just that you're not totally alienated and isolated, but that there are people who know you by name, and you know them, and you know their stories, and you know their families and their histories. Just makes you feel good about life.
That's interesting. What I thought was quite interesting in the book is that you talked a lot about your Sicilian roots and how that actually made you feel more accepted and more part of the scene there, whereas a lot of foreigners that come to Paris and France maybe feel extremely alienated because of that. How did that make you fit in? What's so special about this part of town that an immigrant gets accepted? We're talking about fairly central Paris here.
Yes, but this neighborhood is much more what we would call artisanal. It's zone artisan, so that you have a lot of food merchants in a very, very small geographical area. Especially on the lower part of the street, you don't have like lots of insurance companies or clothing stores, and that helps the community because everybody can bond around food. And my father owned a little Italian food store in Niagara Falls. And he always used to say, no matter what, no matter how poor you are, everybody's got to eat. And if you can make a connection with the other over food, it's great. So, for example, I got to know the French cheesemonger by telling him about Italian cheese. And the young woman whose father had been the fishmonger who went out of business and then went to work for the butcher, I showed her how to cut prosciutto really thin because I knew how to do it.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Earful Tower. It's Oliver G here with Elaine Sciolino. We're sitting in Shakespeare and Company bookshop with a cat next to us. What's going on with the cats in the bookshops here?
I think it's part of the charm of this bookshop. I'm allergic to cats, so I'm not going to pick up this cat.
We can change seats if you want.
But I can say we're in this extraordinary room with a piano and sort of flowers that are kind of faded and wilting in the corner, and surrounded by ceiling to floor wonderful books, probably a number of first editions. So it's both daunting and an inspiration at the same time.
It's almost like we're 100 years back, just sitting here, and things haven't actually moved.
Exactly. We're sort of frozen in time.
Yeah. What's also interesting is they're closed. The shop's closed, so we're in here quite privately. It feels almost we're sitting on one of the beds that, as I understand, they used to let authors sleep on for free for a week or so when they used to come through Paris.
Yes, but it's nice and hard. There's no mattress on it, so that they wouldn't stay too many nights because it wouldn't get too comfortable.
Otherwise, the cats would chase them out, probably. What I wanted to talk to you about is that you are a long way from home. We're in the 5th arrondissement right now. You must feel uncomfortable being so far away from a place that you have dedicated a book to and spend a lot of your time.
No, because I lived in the 7th arrondissement, and I've written about this neighborhood. Like, for example, we're very close to the oldest tree in Paris. I've written about the oldest tree in Paris. That? It's just you just like across the street, go into the little garden across the street. It's kind of held up by cement in the bark, but you can in the roots in the bark. You can go find it though. And I've written about Notre Dame when I once wrote a story about Paris at night, and I went up to the top of Notre Dame with the lighting engineer of Paris so that he could show me how he used special lighting for the Notre Dame. So I'm at home in a lot of places in Paris, Oliver.
Great. One other place that you were really at home in the book you mentioned, it's very clear that you're talkative with the people. You can go into the cheese shop. You talk about sniffing the baguettes and talking to the fishmonger. This is something I wanted to bring up with you because I'm terrible at specifically cheese. When it comes to Paris, as soon as I got here, I found it really difficult to go into the fromagerie and order cheese because I didn't know how you do it and where you start. How did you tackle that, and how did you turn these into blossoming friendships?
I asked him for a cheese lesson.
Oh, okay.
And I went in one morning before he opened up, and I said, "Tell me everything I need to know about French cheese." Oh. And so he gave me a lesson. And of course, he said to me, "Oh, it would take you 20 years to learn about French cheese." And I said, "Okay, how about 2 hours? Well, how much can we cover in 2 hours?" But I really find, and it's because I think I have been a lifelong journalist, that if you come to people with curiosity and a sense of respect and an openness, you will get something back, and the other person will reach out to you. Come with me to the Rue des Martyrs. We'll go see Eve and Anique, and we'll have them give you Cheese 101.
James was having a laugh before when we were talking about cheese because he said it's easy. You just point to what you want and they'll give it to you, but it's not that easy.
No. What you say is, I'm having a very special friend, a very special woman coming over for dinner tonight, and I need an assortiment of your best cheeses that are ready to eat today. What can I offer her?
Everything's on the Rue des Martyrs.
It's the center of the universe.
And indeed, that says in the book. Someone said it's the center of France. Someone else said it's the center of the universe.
Yes.
I
didn't make that up. Yeah, no. Somebody else did.
Well, we'll see. We'll see in the years to come when people are attributing quotes to you or to whoever came up with it. I personally love the Rue des Martyrs. I'm there almost every week. There's a cafe at the top, KB Cafe.
Yes.
Excellent for people watching. Is that somewhere that you frequent, or is that too far up the street?
That's much too chic and too young for me. You're much too cool. It's much too cool for me. I hang out with all the old guys down at number 8.
I should interrupt that. You said before this interview started you would be quite happy to hang out with young guys like James and myself.
That was supposed to be off the record. You weren't supposed to talk about that.
Exactly. I've got a question. This book has been translated into French as well. It was first in English and then translated to French?
Yes.
How have the French people reacted to it, especially because they can be sensitive about French bashing, as it's known? Not that you're French bashing at all, but they can be sensitive about hearing about that.
And especially from a foreigner's point of view, talking about their own country. How did they accept that? How was the reception?
This is the second. I've written 4 books, and the last 2, both of which have been about France, have been translated into French. And I'm really honored as an American to be translated into French, because sometimes it can be very difficult if you're an Anglophone to be writing about France and then translate it into French. This one has just come out in French just a few weeks ago, and so it's just now being received by the French so-called elite. But I can just tell you that taking this book on the Rue des Martyrs and giving it to people who are in the book has been one of the joys of my life in France. I mean, to give it to my guy who's going to teach you all about cheese, Yves Chatenier, and have this guy say to me, I have been in this cheese business for 50 years, and now my life story is told in a book. I mean,
what a thrill.
What a thrill.
For those just tuning in, this is the Earful Tower. This is Oliver G. talking with Elaine Sciolino, and we're in Shakespeare and Company bookshop. If you haven't heard of her book yet, or you haven't read it, it's called The Only Street in Paris Life on the Rue des Martyrs. How's my pronunciation, James?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You say it always sounds better from a native.
It's the Rue des Martyrs. I've actually got a question for you, because we saw that, I believe Annie Hidalgo, she tweeted about your book the other day. That must also, when you're talking about handing your book out to the people who you talk about in your book, and to get the mayor of Paris to actually cover your book, that must be amazing as well.
Yes, but I'm working really hard to get an interview with Anne Hidalgo, because I'd like to do a chapter on her for my new book, which is about the Seine River. And she's been very involved now in closing off the Berge, the right bank roadway. And I just got an email from one of her assistants saying she doesn't have time to receive me. So if you can do anything to convince her that she really should give me an interview, this would be great.
I'm not sure if Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, is listening to this show.
Well, if she's not, she should, because you do an excellent show.
Thank you very much, Elaine. But if you are listening, Anne, and if indeed you speak English, which I'm not sure, if she doesn't, there's no use. But if you're listening, get in touch. We want to hear from you. We want you in the next chapter of Elaine's book. A question I've got, Elaine. Is it a challenge to focus all your attention on writing about one street? I mean, this is a very specific topic. How did you manage it?
I have to confess, this was really fun. First of all, there was no logistical challenge because it was just outside my door. There were no travel expenses. I didn't have to get on airplanes. I didn't have to carry suitcases. It just was me and the street. And every day it was a little different, and it was just fun.
And a lot of cheese.
And a lot of eating, yes, a lot of eating and drinking.
A lot of benefits.
A lot of benefits.
Did they treat you differently when they knew that you were writing a book?
They treated me differently after I wrote a story in the New York Times about the closing of the fish store. Because until then, I just was this kind of odd foreigner. And look, you guys are
Odd foreigners.
Well,
we get that one a lot.
Yeah.
James is half French, so he's kind of like
Just
one
moved in.
foot in and one foot out. But you come into a neighborhood as a foreigner, there's a little distrust. Are you going to stay? Are you going to leave? Are you going to treat them with respect? And so in the beginning, I'd say, hi, I'm this journalist from the New York Times, blah, blah. They'd say, yeah, right. And then I wrote a story about the crisis of the closing of the fish store, which was a big deal on the Rue des Martyrs because the whole bottom of the street is zoned artisanal, which means that if a artisan goes out of business, he or she has to be replaced by another artisan. So the fish store closes. This is a huge deal. And I write a one-page story for the New York Times. I mean, people said, the New York Times is interested in a fish store closing in Paris. And it gave me kind of standing because people said, okay, she puts her money where her mouth is and she's serious. And they said, well, you should keep going. Let us tell you more stories. And little by little, I said, you know what? I think there's a book here. And it wasn't a huge book, but it was an important book.
And what I really like about it is how you brought these people together. I think as we're sort of winding up here, you should tell a bit about the last chapter of the book, how you managed to, you can tell the story, how you brought it all together. Without giving too much away, of course.
Well, it won't give things away. People don't really spend a lot of time getting to know each other. I mean, even I have a French friend on the street. She didn't even know the cheesemongers' names. And they didn't know her name. And she'd been living in the neighborhood for 20 years because she had kept up this kind of formality. And I decided, I'm an outsider. I'm an American. I can play by my own rules. I don't have to impress anybody or pretend I'm French. So I decided to organize an American potluck dinner. Potluck, I don't know if your listeners know what that means, but in America, it means everybody brings a dish. And it's all messy and no order. And you might have too many pasta dishes or too many desserts and not enough salads, whatever. And everyone came and everybody brought something. And it sort of brought people together from one end of the street, which starts in the 9th arrondissement, all the way into Montmartre in the 18th arrondissement. And we all gathered together at a bistro. And I thought maybe people wouldn't get along with each other. So I asked this friend of mine who's this Puerto Rican American opera tenor to come and sing because I thought maybe we should have some entertainment.
Which is what you always need to bring groups together.
Yeah, some entertainment. So he came and sang, and we all had a great time. And it was one of those moments in life where you think everything's okay with the world.
That's really interesting because, as you said, I think in France we tend to keep these formalities and these distances, even though, from you're saying, from the person who knew about was it the baker for 20 years?
Yes.
Who didn't? The fishmonger, sorry.
Cheesemonger.
Cheesemonger.
Yeah.
You tend to keep this Monsieur, Madame, even though, whereas
right.
in English-speaking countries, we go straight to the first name,
That's
and
right.
it's, hey, how's it going? And that's probably something that you've actually brought yourself. You've given this to the streets, this sense of close friendship, closer neighbours, really.
Well, and you say friendship. I mean, I can't say that I'm really close friends with everybody. But for example, when the antique dealer, who happens to be Jewish, had no place to go for Passover because his apartment had been flooded and he couldn't host his own Passover Seder. My husband's Jewish, and so we invited him and his daughter and granddaughter to our Passover table, which is what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And that is just the way. I mean, it makes my life more fun, doesn't it?
For everybody involved. Maybe on a bit of a depressing note, to finish up here. Calling this street the only street in Paris, some might say, suggests that the other streets aren't worth anything anymore, and this sort of feeling that Paris has maybe lost its charm over the years. Is this true? Is Paris losing the thing that people love so much about it?
Look, Paris is changing. It's evolving. It's getting globalized. There's. I just wrote a story about Latin Paris because they're all. I mean, every time you turn around, there's another Argentinian or Venezuelan or Peruvian restaurant opening up. The character and nature of Paris is changing, but I wanted to capture the spirit. Even if shops have gone out, new ones have come in. I wanted to say, what is it about this street and about my encounter with this street that is human and is special? And I think that does survive and still exist here.
Great. And now I'm going to read some questions here. We've got really quick questions to finish off, including some from some readers downstairs. Let's start with this one. What is the second best street in this city?
The second best street in Paris? Well, let's make it the street that I live on, because I don't live on the Rue des Martyrs. I live on the Rue Notre-Dame de Lorette. And this is a great street. It has a history. There used to be Lorette on this street, and the Lorette were kind of like independent streetwalkers. They didn't have to go into a house of prostitution with a madam, but they ran their own businesses. So there's sort of like a feminist spirit of business on this street.
Hang on, I'm sensing a follow-up book here. I think you've got the topic of your next book.
I think it's been done. I think there have been lots of books about the courtesan in French history.
Okay, quick fire question. Next one, as James mentioned earlier, the mayor Anne Hidalgo has endorsed your book. She's tweeted out.
Yes.
Did you get a key to the city or to the street?
I have not gotten a key to the city or the street. I have been decorated with the Legion of Honor.
Congratulations.
By the French state, and that to me is sort of like an Oscar and a Pulitzer and a César all wrapped into one.
And that was for improving relationships between France and America.
That was. I used to be the diplomatic correspondent for the New York Times, and when I first came to Paris, it was at a time when France and the United States had a very tense relationship because France did not support the Bush administration's war in Iraq.
Okay, next question is, for which person on the street would you like to switch lives with?
Well, maybe for a day, I would love to be Laurence Gillery, who spends her time repairing 18th century mercury-driven barometers and doing gold gilding. If I had that kind of talent, that might be really fun.
Fantastic answer. Here's one from a reader downstairs. She said, where did you get your stockings from? And for the listeners at home, perhaps you can explain the stockings as well.
I'm wearing stockings that are asymmetrical, polka-dotted, and I got them at the bargain sale at Bon Marché for €5 after Christmas.
There you go. I hope that solves that question. And last question here is, what next? You mentioned you've got a book.
I'm writing a book on the Seine River. I attacked a street. Now I'm attacking a river. The only problem is the street was only 1 kilometer long, and the Seine River is 800 kilometers long. So I got a lot of work ahead of me, but you know what? We should go, and a big book, but we should go take a couple trips along the Seine River. We'd have some fun.
I would love it on a bateau mouche, one of the tourist boats, or were you envisaging something else?
I'm doing. I've already been out with the police fluvial. The police that go 50 miles an hour on their those little Zodiac boats.
Yeah. And Anne Hidalgo, if you're listening, can you hook us up with a trip down the Seine? That would be a brilliant way to do our next episode that we can.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to invite Anne Hidalgo to show us the Seine in Paris?
I think we could invite her, but I think we might struggle to get her to even respond.
Well, on ne sait jamais. You can never take no for an answer.
Thanks so much, Elaine. You've been listening to The Eiffel Tower. This is Oliver G here with Elaine. I struggle on your name every time I say it out loud.
Well, you've got an easy name.
Sciolino.
It's very easy, yeah.
Of course.
You've got an easier one, but
you were greedy with the letters in your last name. 3 is all you need. That's all you need. But we've been talking with Elaine Sciolino, who is a Legion of Honor winner, a New York Times bestseller. Fantastic new book about Rue des Martyrs. Go out and read it. And thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Eiffel Tower with Oliver G.